The sun on the field, the feeling I feel when I'm living my life for what's real. Make America healthy, feeling like it's time for a change. We're going back to common sense, making America healthy again. We're going back to common sense, making America healthy again. We're going back up healthy again.
Woo!
What's
What up, gangsters?
I'll never get sick of that intro video.
It's great.
Tonight
is Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. Oh, man, we got a great show. Wishing everybody, hope everyone had an amazing April 20th in the last week, and it was just the best days ever. Guys, how are you feeling?
we call it Easter, Kyle.
Oh, yeah, Easter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was my daughter's birthday, too. Oh, yeah, 1 year.
Yeah, somewhere in the
old.
last 10 years, I transitioned from celebrating 420 to celebrating Easter, and it feels good.
He
I don't have
is
anything against the 420 bros these days, but I just don't really partake anymore. And life is good. Been a very Maha week for me, so I'm feeling awesome.
What
Yeah,
was the
did you do
most
some running or
Maha thing you
something?
did, Ian?
I mean, today I did legs, and then I came home and ate a steak with my bare hands, and that felt great. Got a nice long run in the sun a couple days ago. I've just been eating really well, home cooked food like every day. I've been getting lots of exercise, gym and running and outdoors and stuff. Lots of time with the dogs and the girlfriend and just with friends, and just not so glued to Twitter arguments, which is really good for your health.
What?
So,
Who could have ever
I
imagined?
know it's crazy, but it's been a great turning point in my life. So
Love it, man. Sounds
Yeah.
good. Kyle, first birthday. How's Ayla? That must be
She's
nice.
fantastic. She's got a mean case of the chicken pox, but she's over the hump on it. A little bit sad I
Go.
didn't organize a chicken pox party because
are you telling me you don't have a chickenpox vaccine, Kyle? Are you not vaccinated for the pox, bro?
No, I'm actually going to be. I've got my medical appointment to get my green card coming up too, and that's going to be one of the things that they're asking is you don't have your Varicella vaccine.
Straight to jail. Straight to jail. Straight to
had
jail.
chicken pox. We did it. The natural immunity, and honestly, Ayla at 1, man, she's some kids don't get that bad, but she got it really bad, all over, tons of dots. But now it's now we're over the hump, and she's happy and amazing and glorious and healthy and
Kyle Kemper, Grandma Killer.
I see Jack Rabbit in the comments saying he just got here. Have they talked about this autism data collection versus HIPAA yet? No, we have not yet. But yes, there is a database of all the autists apparently being suggested, and we will talk about it, Jack. Don't you worry about it, bro.
I got concerns. Right? Mostly because this guy on the interwebs told me that they are targeting the autistic because they have super telepathic powers.
Who told you that?
and so creating some kind of database might not be a good thing.
I'm just going to say I did put out a whole YouTube video about the CIA conspiracy theory with the UFOs and the autistic kids and all the stuff. And, just take it for what it is. Just some tinfoil.
Just throwing it out there, right? I'm super interested to get into that. I mean, it feels like the team is coming together. I know a couple people who moved to Washington, D.C. this week to take their jobs at HHS. Shout out, much love to the fam. Going to work. And I feel like we're going to start seeing some of the big changes and have a lot to talk about. So,
yeah. I mean, we actually saw some pretty cool changes this week. Yes, this is my telepathy tapes tinfoil video in case anyone wants to get real tinfoily about it. Now this whole autism database being suggested, it's a whole new layer.
Let me just say 10 out of 10.
Oh, thanks, bro.
I finally got around to watching it, and
I thought it was pretty fun.
You were not wrong about it being like super white pill, right? Like
it's a huge white pill.
If you're like, man, everything is so dark. I'm so sick of the freaking world. I'm telling you, go watch Ian's YouTube video. You're gonna be like, oh my god,
all right,
God, it's great, right? It was a good watch over Easter weekend, bro.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's strangely related in some ways. Like kind of. That's all I'll say. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, maybe we should bring the whole team in here, man. We got
and let's bring the whole team in. Before we just bring them to, like, the title of the show is One Cancer with That Wi-Fi. We're gonna have a guest tonight called Charles Frohman, who's going to do a lot of work around that space and many other spaces. He was kind of in Maha before it was even Maha. We'll kind of bring him up shortly as well. But we've got a whole bunch of other topics that we're going to dive into tonight. It's going to be a great show. But without further ado, let's bring on the rest of Club Maha. Please welcome Billy Zero.
Hey-o.
What's up, guys?
What up, Billy?
Hey.
Please welcome Damo.
Yo, what's happening?
Boldly Grow, what's up?
Let's get it. How we doing?
Speaking of growing, let's bring up Johnny Paradise.
When you say it like that, I feel like we got to make intro videos or songs or sound effects for everybody.
Rowdy.
Right?
What's
Little, like,
And last but not least, before we bring up our guests, let's bring up the amazing, our incredible producer, the woman behind the scenes, the hostess with the mostest, Project Cheney. Yeah.
It's weird coming on screen without an intro
I
video.
love it. It's like WrestleMania up in here.
Right? In a past life, Kyle was the intro for WrestleMania. He worked for the WWE.
I do have to say though, intro videos, like I might have changed the whole podcast game.
I sure think so. I think
Right?
you're like,
I'm not. You know what? In fact, new demand Maha Club, if you will. Like from now on, I get an intro video. Or I'm not coming. I'm going full diva here.
We gave
Yeah, I
you
think
you've got a whole opening segment, Dustin.
You guys made me look fatter than I even am.
Hey, I didn't make the video, Dustin. I just work here.
You thanked them for doing that.
I mean, it's better, right? Like you don't want your cartoon version to be too handsome. Right? It's away from your real life handsome. I'm not trying to be one of these e-girls catfishing.
So, yo, it's all right. We'll be catching up to our AI versions for the rest of our lives.
True story.
Okay, well, we've got I want to welcome as well. Like, I think we should probably maybe we just jump in because we've got this club vibe going. Let's bring on Charles too, and set the stage for Charles and explain a little bit about Charles. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome, Charles.
Billy speaks very highly of you. Everybody, welcome Charles. So, Charles, this is the Club Maha podcast. As you can see, there's a bunch of us on here. We meet every Wednesday, 9 p.m. We talk about the pertinent issues to Maha, delving a little bit deeper than many may go, sometimes just touching the top, but we're on a quest for more knowledge. And we've got, one of the best researchers in the entire world, Ian Carroll. There's 2 boxes over this way, right here. So, Charles, welcome to the program. Welcome to the club.
Thanks, and thanks to Billy for inviting me.
Yeah.
Charles, could you tell us a little bit about your endeavors and what kind of brings you to this space today? Like, I think that most people that are watching right now probably don't have any context on you. So could you give like the, 2-minute rundown of like what your work is and what you're working on these days?
Sure, and nice to be on a podcast with Ian Carroll.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
I guess all of Maha learned who you were on Rogan, so
yeah,
good job there. Billy, I met a week or two ago when on LinkedIn, as a lot of us do networking, I met one of his friends from the Kennedy campaign just to network on Maha discussions and what's possible, what's next, who's got jobs, that kind of thing. But I was a Republican congressional staffer back in the 90s, becoming libertarian, and then a trade association lobbyist in the financial area at the Cato Institute, then on my own with small nonprofits. And I befriended Gary Johnson, who ran for president, and I helped that in the 2012, 2016, left to go teach high school history in DC's inner city. And then I guess I got into health insurance sales, selling alternatives to insurance. So I'm very knowledgeable on the benefit disruptions out there. And then got into health freedom lobbying around 2018 or so. And so during COVID, I got a bunch of politicians involved to pressure FDA not to authorize the clot shot for toddlers. And lately, I've been doing a lot of education of congressional staffers about the wireless mesh, which is a bit mysterious for a lot of health freedom people who mostly still are in the vaccine space. Or I am too. I have a bill in Congress on that. I have a pretty cool monthly Zoom that a lot of the Maha types attend, third Friday every month, with big names that you would know, like Robert Malone, and had John Stockton, the Utah Jazz guy that went anti-vaccine on. Others that we would know, frontline doctor leaders types. I try to platform all the big Maha issues. So I've had geoengineering that I know some of you care about over the years, pesticides, all of the Maha issues. So we have emails for all those issues, including geoengineering, wireless, that you can send. I can share my screen and show you it if you like. But basically, my client, National Health Federation, is the world's oldest health freedom organization. They go back to the 1950s when they're helping all these maverick doctors who are being drummed out of work from the FDA licensing boards and the AMA. For healing people and threatening pharma profits. But over the decades, they've helped legalize acupuncture, naturopaths, chiropractors, and natural supplements. We're the sole natural negotiator at this thing called Codex, which is a UN body that standardizes the food trade globally. So what kind of residues can you have from the toxins you put in the cows or the crops? What potency can you have with the vitamins? So that's basically it. And then because I'm also in the health insurance space, we all have to diversify to make money, right? I know a lot about disrupting Obamacare, getting folks into alternatives like sharing savings accounts, helping the cash market, which is critical in the oligopoly that we have for healthcare payment. And that also helps the Maha movement, because when you become a cash shopping patient, you learn about alternatives to save money and get healthy. And so, I have sort of a niche in that way, in that I know the Maha issues, but I also know that the health payment issues, which is more the traditional area for conservative staff in Congress over the past few decades. So that's it. We have a brand new campaign opposing trackable ID. I think, Dustin, you were talking about that. Some other groups have that too. It's an important issue. We have a new campaign also against the PrEP Act I'm working on. I think folks are discovering how that's sort of a catch-all, sort of a get out of jail card for whatever doctors do these days, even if it's tangential to the original countermeasure.
Charles,
yeah.
I love that you said, and that's all after covering chemtrails, health savings account, health insurance,
wireless mesh network.
Wireless mesh. I mean, you are covering so much ground there, and I feel like there's a ton to dissect and kind of like dig a little deeper on. That's super interesting. So chemtrails. So like, how thick is your tinfoil hat? Because that's obviously not real. I'm reliably assured. But my question is, like, despite the fact that we know that they do like weather modification, these experiments have happened, and there have been reports that they're putting heavy metals to reflect sunlight because global warming is super serial and real and totally not made up in order to be exploited. What can you give us an idea of like what they're actually spraying and what it is?
I can't no more than, I'm a lobbyist, I'm a salesman, I'm a communicator and connector. I always have experts as wingmen and wing women in my lobbying. I've got my vaccine expert, the Human Vaccine Encyclopedia, Greg Glazer. I've got my wireless experts, Odette Wilkins, Council, and some others. I've got my geoengineering experts. You probably know who they are: Jim Lee, Susan Clark, Jolie Diane, Renette Senham.
Great people.
Yeah, and Jim Lee is probably the main guy. Not.
So I
And
guess
it's a little bit
another question
controversial.
would be,
Every issue has internecine conflict, right? Two steps forward, one step back. Jim is focused on cleaning up the exhaust from the jets, which is useful because EPA has had that fight for years. And in our sample letter that I could share on screen or just put in chat or whatever, give it to you. I point to two main things: the federal weather enterprise that Trump issued in his first term, and then Biden's collection of funding through a variety of agencies coordinated under the World Meteorological Association organization. To show folks that this is tangible and real. It's not a theory or a conspiracy. This is current policy. And in the federal weather enterprise, there is language de-emphasizing jet fuel aviation cleanup. So, like with every other Maha issue, the controllers have always, made it easy for industry to get away with murder. But Jim Lee just did a stream yesterday or the day before on the new chemtrail commission. So he is the expert. Now there are those who will argue with him because there is secretive geoengineering. Obviously, we all know that. But I think Jim has got some good ideas around treaties to at least get the disclosure more clear, so that anyone who doesn't disclose when they are modifying the weather, that creates a trap where we can get them later legally. So, we've all been excited about the dozen states with bills to limit explicit geoengineering, and of course, that explicit word is what limits the possible utility of those state bills, because a lot of who knows if it's really explicit or et cetera. There's all kinds of wiggle room there. So you need a federal solution. And I think we all can agree that basically having RFK there is really our best leverage on any issue, including my wireless issue. So, and Zeldin's been cooperative with RFK over at EPA. We'll see how really good Zeldin is. He's got a sort of a bad track record. I think when he was a New York County commissioner of some sort, he voted against some organic requirements for local park cleanup, and that's a big issue around the pesticide issue in the Farm Bill, which we can discuss. That's a giant vehicle for a lot of bad stuff that we killed last year. The Farm Bill would have preempted pesticide lawsuits, which is happening now in some states like Georgia. We have a new campaign against that to protect your ability to sue big biotech for pesticide harm. The Farm Bill would make it harder to label and disclose GMOs. It subsidizes the wireless mesh on our farms, which a court already has blamed for killing cows, reducing milk yield. Wireless is obsolescent, meaning all technology builds in a termination period, forcing you to spend money to upgrade. And wireless is really good at that. So it's going to bankrupt marginal farmers, leading to more purchase of American farmland by Bill Gates, WEF, World Economic Forum friends. 5G is the most insecure node of the wireless network, so it's going to expose our domestic food supply to hacking by whoever is against us. So back to geoengineering, you need to talk to Jim Lee, because it's all these
oh,
issues
Charles,
are complicated.
let me interrupt you for a second and just say,
Yeah.
one of the things that I know you might not be able to be the expert speaker on the topic, but have you ever seen like this level of discussion around this topic, like out in Washington? Do you feel like there's some good traction here Is the
Oh,
is the
yeah.
awareness rising? Is the window moving?
Yeah, that's the kind of question that I can answer. You know, as a longtime political guy, um, the momentum questions. Yeah, I mean, who would expect half a dozen states to have bills under consideration to limit geoengineering? I mean, that was the farthest reach for Maha geoengineering. Everything else is,
Mm-hmm.
vaccines became safe to discuss because of COVID. I've been in the trenches in the state legislatures long before COVID, where you had a bunch of mothers with injured kids getting condescended to by these slimy politicians. It's disgusting. In Virginia, here in Virginia, in Richmond, I won't go into details, but basically envision 300 moms with injured kids lining the hallway to the Senate, and these politicians, Congress critters, just walking by, going to vote against them. I mean, doesn't that make you want to
Yeah,
just?
it's crazy. Charles, we actually have a video queued up. Janie, you want to pull up that video, the American Values video, and we'll if that's I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you can do it. And then we can have a little roundtable little discussion about.
Is that the chemtrail one from Dr. Jane Ruby?
No, that's the one
the other
above
one?
that or below that.
The high wire one?
No, not the high wire one. Keep going.
That was Jim Lee with Dell.
Oh, I don't have that yet.
Janie, the other thing I would love for you to pull
American
up is I
Values
have
one.
my screen shared with you, and I want to make sure that I found the right Jim Lee, because I would love to confirm Climate Viewer. This is the YouTube channel.
Yeah. He's the guy.
Yeah,
I've
and
known
this is
him for
our boy
years.
down here, Jim Lee, who's streaming it, right?
Yeah.
And so he's got a channel on YouTube you can find called Climate Viewer, where he's putting out live content. But then he's not hard to find if you just search for Jim Lee weather modification, and you can find Climate Viewer News. You can find things like a map of UN tracking weather modification projects, all kinds of great resources, as well as what looks like older resources associated with him, weathermodificationhistory.com, which I think is associated with him.
Yeah, it's all him.
Yeah, right. Some really cool resources that he's built for people to use. And so if you search, Jim Lee and weather modification, you can find all kinds of cool resources. And I just wanted to point out that it's hilarious that he says right at the top of the screen, not an expert, Jim Lee. Although, let's be clear, not an expert is a disclaimer. And it's hard to find any better experts than people that are outside the mainstream, that are questioning the paid for narratives, that are doing deep research over many years of hard work. So that's pretty cool to find. I'll be excited to look into this.
We all have friends who are the expert who have never lost a debate. That's Jim Lee
Exactly.
on this issue.
Autism
And he frustrates
This is
people
being
because
driven by
he will
better
downplay
diagnosis,
the
awareness.
secretive. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll stop talking.
All right, let's. This is a video that American Values put out about the current some of the gaslighting that's going on that Bobby's addressing.
Autism is way up.
This is being driven by better diagnosis,
Increased awareness.
better detection of autism. The rates go up over time as diagnosis has gotten better.
Broadening diagnostic criteria.
How much of this is just that we now have diagnostic criteria?
One child in 150.
1 in 110 children.
1 in 88 children is autistic.
1 in 36 kids.
1 in 31 children diagnosed to be on the spectrum.
I don't think we have an epidemic of autism.
This rise in diagnosed cases of autism is a positive.
Whoa.
We need to move away from this ideology that the autism prevalence increases, the relentless increases, are simply artifacts of better diagnoses, better recognition, or changing diagnostic criteria. The baseline for autism in this country was established with the largest epidemiological study in history. They found less than 1 in 10,000. Today we're 1 in 31. Both doctors and therapists in the past were not stupid. They weren't missing all these cases. The epidemic is real, and it's time for everybody to stop attributing this to this ideology of epidemic denial.
Yeah. That's
No
Ian,
mas.
thoughts?
that's.
love
I
it.
mean, we've all been seeing the numbers creep, and 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 31 is insane, and that's not explainable through new like that's not a thing you sweep under the rug with just new diagnostic criteria. Even if you go from like just like autism as a like full on nonverbal autism to autism spectrum disorder, even so, that is not an explanation for 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 31.
And it's even
you
higher
don't have to be an
with
expert to
boys in
realize that.
California too. It's like 1 in 12 or 1 in 15.
Yeah,
That's
think
right.
about the burden on the healthcare system when you have 1 in 12, even 1 in 30. The burden on the healthcare system when you have 1 in 30 adults growing up that are in some way needing services, in some way needing assistance, in some way needing care in order to live a normal life.
Yeah,
They
Even
say
if
it's going to be
none
$1
of them
trillion.
families.
exactly. That's out of control. And it's a huge
Communities.
tragedy.
God.
They say it's going to be $1 trillion in healthcare costs by the year 2030. And you know, Kennedy makes such a great point that you don't see it. It's not a condition which limits your longevity, and you don't see it in older people who what is it? It works out to almost 1% now is nonverbal. We don't have that in the older people, so we gotta figure this out.
Yeah, think of that. So 1% nonverbal. Think that through. If you went to a high school with 1,000 kids, that means there were 100 people that couldn't speak, right? That means there were 100 people that needed
10.
lifelong care in the home at all times to help them, do things.
10,
right?
10 out of 1,000.
10 of
But
them.
let's not ignore the fact.
Thank you.
Johnny just said this adds $1 trillion to GDP. So
It's insane.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about.
Oh, you said it funny there,
current-
Damo, with a wry smile. Yeah, it adds $1 trillion to GDP, right? It's $1 trillion in waste to our economy. It's a drag on us in so many real ways. But you're right. The big industry who benefits from it, it's $1 trillion in their books. Exactly.
I wanted to ask about the current situation. If you guys all heard this past week, and I wanted to know, Charles, if you've had this before. I know I've talked to a couple people, and this seems like an old phrase that's come about this week, and I want to know if it's programming. But all of a sudden, this past week, we got a lot of this. Autism is a gift. My child can write a book. My child can, and it's like, I got cancer and I beat it. So therefore, cancer is a gift. This has come out of nowhere to me. But in talking to other people, this has been around for a while. They've done this before. Is this something when you were fighting this, in the 2010s and around that? Did you hear this? Was there some kind of programming against your work?
It's new to me, and I discovered it probably like a lot of people the hard way. I was posting on Facebook how wonderful it is that there's finally going to be an investigation into the triggers for this horrible epidemic, which is horrible, especially for that 25% that RFK was mentioning is severely autistic. And I got hammered, including by a lot of libertarians. Did you guys notice libertarians were so horrible during COVID? There's such pharmacists. My friends from the libertarian movement, Jeffrey Tucker and a few of us were just horrified, but it was awful. But yeah, and I guess I've learned that it was the expansion of the word autism absorbing Asperger's that made a lot of really non-autistic people suddenly autistic. And yeah, it's like a repeated phrase. How dare you, challenge our artistic situation? That's very strange, isn't it?
It's very strange to me.
Yeah, I feel like now if anybody's just being a little bit off, you can just be like, wow, they're on the spectrum.
It's actually in young kids, it's actually kind of the cool thing to pathologize yourself. Young kids, like middle school age kids and high school age kids now, they sort of share their diagnoses as like little badges, little honor badges. And I'm all for destigmatizing discussions about mental health, but there's a difference between that and when you actually work in schools with young kids. Excuse me. There's like a discussion as though it's like these are good things, and it becomes almost like you're not cool if you don't have diagnoses to share, just like pronouns to share. And it really it's a really weird slide and trend that does not seem organic and certainly is not healthy for our country.
I have a friend who's one of those frontline like activists on the ground. He has 2 non-functioning, non-verbal autistic children. That both happened right after they got the MMR shot. Right, the same story. Get the MMR.
Coincidence, just a coincidence. Obviously,
spike a high fever, and then all of the progress they'd been making up until that point, like suddenly starts reversing. And he gets like his frustration is that the spectrum, if you will, lumps in people who are like slightly off with people like his kids who like are non-functioning, who need round the clock 24/7 nonstop care forever. And so like you being a little off, like, and listen, I'm a crypto bro, so like we joke all the time about the tism and like like everybody's got a little tism, but like I feel it's an injustice to like the parents that are dealing with like the hardcore worst cases, to have that looped in with like this, I don't know, like the transcendental meditation, like you've got a special issue. Like, let's just say that you're also like in the same category as like the kid who's non-functioning over there. Like it's very frustrating for the parents who are dealing with the serious cases.
A similar conversation came up around the telepathy tapes happening to drop at this exact time, because people that listen to the telepathy tapes podcast can come away with it getting the false impression that autism is a gift that should be I mean, like, yes, everyone is a gift and every child is a gift. And yes, everyone is wonderful. But there's this false impression that you can receive from listening to the telepathy tapes that this is a good thing, that we should have more autistic people because it's like cool superpowers. And that is not at all what the families and parents of these autistic kids feel. And I'm saying, like, in their own words, in their own books, in their own tweets, in their own words, they're saying obviously they love their children and obviously they're so glad to have the gift of a child, but they would never wish this on anyone else. And in the words of these autistic children themselves, speaking through letterboards, which is extremely laborious, these autistic children, I've one an example named Houston, specifically says when a friend has a child that is diagnosed with autism, he says to them, go to the doctor immediately to try to do anything you can to stop that kid from being autistic, implying that this is not a thing you would wish on anyone, to deal with the burden of like true autism for a life of care and like disability is a weird word, but like disability, it's a weird timing, and it's not something to like glorify and like lump in with Asperger's as though it's all good.
To that point you made with the parents specifically, this is something that most people don't think about. I didn't think about it, surely, in trying to talk to parents that have those nonverbal, wearing a diaper, going to need care. Those parents are concerned if they died in a car accident today, they're petrified that their kid is going to end up in an institution. They're also petrified of something that I didn't think about until this last week in trying to prepare for some of these shows, talk to people. They don't want to come on a show like this and outline the real stories, the real stuff. And I'm talking like ripping down walls, chewing on electric cable,
banging your head against walls.
They don't want that because they're afraid of Child Protective Services coming and knocking on the door. So it's in a closet still. We're talking about it, but I'd love to have someone come on here and talk. They don't want to. They're calling it cover. They need cover. They need to know that in their state that no one's going to come, or a neighbor's not going to say, I hear screaming, they're beating their kid. And then that starts the process. So it's something I didn't think about this week. And it's just, then you start thinking about all of the things that parents thinking about getting into a car crash or dying. Who's going to take care of their parents or take care of their kids? Like
there's also the element where those families are already self-isolating, because when you're a family that has an autistic child that is severely autistic, they need round the clock care. But then because your child needs round-the-clock care and you're the best one to give it, you're sort of constantly having your autistic child with you, and because most people don't understand autistic children at all, and most people are weirded out by like really severe autism, you wind up with the situation where they sort of just inherently have to separate from society, and they wind up developing patterns where they'll only go out to eat at times when there's no one in the restaurant, and they'll only go out to the store at the specific time when there's the fewest people in the store, because it's just so much work already to take care of their child and to like live their life and get groceries and go and just do normal things, that they wind up basically becoming completely isolated, and their only respite is if they have some community often of other autistic families in around them that they can like talk to and hang out with, because other than that, no one really understands what they're going through, and most people will either judge them or be weird or like, you know, just in like distance themselves on their own.
I mean, it's not even people being weird, Ian, right? Like you can't call somebody as like a normal babysitter,
exactly,
right, to handle somebody who can fly completely off the handle and start attacking you.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not like the normal options are available. Like you can't, you know, hire the local teenager to come babysit for the night.
Yeah.
Right. Like it is incredibly difficult. And for parents who are not like wealthy, it becomes almost all consuming.
Yeah.
Because you there are no gaps, there are no breaks. And I mean, you cannot undersell how much of a lifelong commitment and just lifelong your life has changed forever for as long as you live when this happens to you.
And while we're having this conversation, I do want to briefly advocate for autistic people, in the sense that when I did all this research for this video about the telepathy tapes, there are ways that autistic people can communicate through letterboards, where they use their gross motor skills to type letters one at a time in order to give thoughts outwards so they can tell what's going on inside of them. And what autistic people are communicating through these letterboards is that they don't have control over their bodies, but they are wonderful people on the inside. They're not doing these things because they're stupid or because they're vacant or because they don't have, like, because they're retarded. They're doing these things because they don't have control over their bodies. And so there's this huge stigma around autistic people as though they're like dumb or bad or whatever it is. And that's not the case. Like, autistic people, as far as I can tell, are wonderful, wholesome souls. They just don't have control over their bodies. Like, literally, their mind does not control their body the way that you and our minds does. And so the stigmatism is deeply destructive. But that does not discount the fact that it's like really hard to take care of these people. It is an epidemic, and the burden on our healthcare system, the burden on the families, the burden on everybody is astronomical, and it needs to be addressed and not gaslit in the way that like these people that clearly aren't dealing with it, they're just, you know, running cover and getting paid, are trying to gaslight.
You know, and that's especially true if we can identify the causes, right? Like, if the only reason we don't know why it's happening is because we're not looking, then maybe it's time we look.
Yeah.
Amen, brother.
I worry though that's right in some ways, that's the oversimplistic answer. That like the even with the vaccines, I think it was Bobby who was the first one who said this to me. I can't remember who to exactly attribute, but it was when I was working on the movie Vaxxed. Said that everybody is vaccine injured, and it's just a matter of different factors of how bad. Yeah. And that really stuck with me. That right, the harmful things that are in a lot of these vaccines. Right, it used to be thimerosal was the big thing that you tried to avoid, but I'm convinced that most of it is hocus pocus and like bad for you. But it affects all of us differently. Mm-hmm. And right, like I think a lot of us won't even know exactly like
allergies, food sensitivities, ADHD, autism, and I'm not saying they're for sure
sexually transmitted diseases. Think of the shame that so many people think it's because they slept around, but really it's because they went abroad and were forced to get some. Oh, I'm going to India. Here's this rung of vaccines. Oh, I'm going to China. You're not going to be able to walk again tomorrow. Oh, I'm going to Africa. Oh, you're going to be blind in a week. And blame Montezuma's revenge and not the fact that you just had a series of vaccines to go to this country.
Interesting.
Like the amount of travel vaccine injuries I feel like that are happening to adults that they're thinking like, I had a love affair in Italy. I must have caught this STD. No more than every gay man under Fauci's watch.
But
so I just feel like it's all vaccine injury, but they just want to shame people.
I feel like Charles really kind of nailed it in his intro, right? Which is there are so many environmental factors and like toxins and carcinogens and think whether it's the wireless mesh network or whatever the freak it is that they're spraying out of the sky or the pesticides, right? Like I think that, I think we've had the discussion with Johnny and others about Roundup and the fact that all these people who are, have gluten intolerances or whatever, like that shit didn't exist when we didn't have Roundup to the degree we had. But we have so many different environmental factors, and I feel like it affects everybody a little bit differently, which makes it really hard to pinpoint, right? Like we all want that silver bullet to be like, this thing, if we just got rid of it, everyone would be healthier. But I think that the Maha has to be addressing like the broad scope of these dozens of different factors that all contribute to making us less healthy.
But before we move off of autism, could someone please school me on this autism database that we're talking about? Because I've been busy this week and I haven't seen it yet. And I want to know what the heck is going on with the proposed autism database. What's the story here?
It was just a comment, I think, that I don't think there's a whole lot of details on it unless there's more to it that I haven't seen.
So, I mean, I saw a couple, and I think Bobby talked about it, the need to better understand in order to, he set this intention, this declaration that by September, he would know the cause of autism. We would all know the cause, what's causing this. And I think he gave a press conference yesterday with Bhattacharya and Macquarie, and in which he declared that they'd be creating a disease registry to be tracking and getting better intelligence on this. And that created, I don't know, a bunch of people took that and started making their own declarations about what that will mean. And
interesting.
I can comment on this.
So I'm seeing comments about the National Database for Autism Research, NDAR, which was founded in 2006.
Charles, go ahead.
I can't address what Ian just said from 2006. What I can speculate and tell me how this sounds. You probably have heard about the controversy over the vaccine safety link data with 30 million records. Twitter is so great. You just read enough comments, you'll get your answers. Apparently, it's data owned by the HMOs that the data link has linked to over the years. And maybe Peter Marks on his way out routed the data back to the HMOs, where as a private group,
Cheney, we have that video we got this Highwire 1 minute video that we should play because Aaron Siri talks with Dell about what's happening and how this is that it?
I don't think that's it.
It was just a 1 minute video, Cheney. I posted on my page.
I think it's a vertical one, but yeah, he's nailing it. That that they're hiding the data from us, right? We want to figure out what's the cause of it, and like you said, they're routing it through the GMOs, through the HMOs, and it's unreal.
Right. So the media, being evil, is characterizing the new effort as grabbing your private data, which our friends would have to do to study the cause of autism and other chronic diseases. That private data being the HMOs that have the data on the vaccine injuries.
Cheney, Put the link in the chat here.
I freaking love how these deep staters now are suddenly concerned about whether it's Elon Musk, like, oh, he's in there hacking your social security numbers, right? Or this nonsense, like, oh, all of a sudden the people who created the freaking, server farms in Utah and like the Big Brother surveillance state are so worried that we're going to get information on data. And
Exactly. You guys are talking about here it is.
All right, let's watch this.
If that wasn't government actors doing it, it would be absolutely criminal. Vaccine safety data. It's a database of 10 million Americans from various HMOs, from Kaiser to Harvard Pilgrim to Henry Ford, and they aggregated it so you can do vaccine safety studies. And all we wanted to do is compare the unvaccinated kids' health outcomes to vaccinated kids. It would have been simple to do it. And now we have found out that, in fact, you can't get the VSD data anymore because the CDC essentially took all that data and returned it to each of the HMOs to make it unavailable so that they thwart the ability for the current administration to actually conduct a study in the VSD. If that wasn't government actors doing it, it would be absolutely criminal.
And it just shows you how afraid they are. Why would you be afraid to allow that study to be done? Why is Peter Marks admitting he's hiding vaccine data from Robert Kennedy Jr.? What are they so afraid of?
What are they so afraid of?
So how does Bobby get that data back, right? Like, what are the steps here?
I don't think that data is coming back. I think that's what he's trying to get around. I mean, if you look at the VAERS data, they stripe out the patient's name. So when I search, I can't tell that, Jack Johnson got this. I can just look and parse the data. In COVID, they stopped asking right away whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated because they realized real quickly that a lot of this injury was with the vaccinated. So they parsed that data real quick. We should have had one of the most robust vaccine data collection agendas within the COVID system the entire time. In fact, we have one of the worst on the planet. And I think this is just par for the course here. They don't want us to see the data. And I think that tells the whole story right there. They don't want us to see the data.
We have a control group, right? Like we have the goddamn Amish who haven't vaccinated their fucking people for a long time to do the comparison.
Exactly.
And I mean, I think, Daniel, you asked, like, well, what do we do? I think this actually comes back to like the system needs an upgrade. We need to have a much better solution for identity stripped data that's not lying with the healthcare, and it is lying actually with the people, and that people's records are able to be shared into larger study bodies in a PII stripped manner. And then that data is actually valuable too. So, ultimately that can come with compensation, and it should lead to better data. But under the current siloed approach, you don't own your data. Your doctors own the data. And until Bobby came in, the government also held on to it, but now they're at risk. So let's slash that. So
we have a solution.
Radical transparency.
In chat, I put our campaigns page, and if you scroll down to our right to decline vaccines, knowing that you can't trust politicians or authority figures or government, basic libertarianism. Our bill that's about to be reintroduced, it's a Gomer bill from the last Congress, or was it 2 Congresses ago, would require informed consent exemption federally for any vaccine that has a federal connection, whether it's licensing, funding, etc. So immediately you could just ignore the whole apparatus, which most of us in Maha want to do anyways. We don't care if folks are going to vaccinate, they're going to vaccinate. We want to ignore you. Secondly, it would require the Surgeon General to form an independent vaccine safety commission whose members would have no ties to industry to report on the unvaxxed comparison disease outcome studies. And if you know anything about those private comparisons that have been done over the years, you know they reproduce a certain outcome, which is 1,000% more chronic disease among the vaccinated. So as long as we could get that information out there, that will help informed consent. That will continue the trend that CDC has reported that more parents than ever are exempting their kids from all the vaccines. So I would encourage folks to look at that campaign on our campaign page to push their politicians to co-sponsor that. Because should our hero Bobby fail in the government just because the system is so rigged and so controlled by the global banksters, this bill would work around and just require government reports on private versions of those studies, comparing the disease outcomes between the unvaccinated and the vaccinated. There's been a bunch of them done, and they all show huge chronic disease among the vaccinated, barely any among the unvaccinated. So that's a solution that has come from one of Aaron Siri's friends, our vaccine attorney, Greg Glazer. And then at some point, I wanted to build on Dustin's comment about everyone being injured, whether they know it or not, from vaccines. That is the case with wireless too. And I can explain why if you guys want to hear about that.
Absolutely. Could you briefly explain what the wireless mesh means too? Okay. I think that's a term that regular people haven't really heard.
Okay. So my kid stole my phone. I was going to show that. The problem with wireless, COVID's catastrophe and tyranny has helped us push back on vaccines. I always say we haven't had a similar catastrophe to help our cause on wireless, because all folks want with wireless is convenience, faster downloads, and they don't know anything about the injuries or the dynamics of the politics, which is exactly the same with pharma. No informed consent with either pharma or telecom, suppression of the science, and capture of the bureaucracy. 1/3 of Americans are sensitive right now to the radiation emanating from your cell phone, your router, the nearby cell tower. That's a good image. Just as there are alternatives to vaccines, namely, off-label drug use or natural treatments, there are alternatives to wireless, namely wired connections to your home through cable or fiber, or even your copper line has internet capabilities that aren't as good, but they're better than wireless. There's a cost to wireless. If you get these meter readers, they'll read the radiation output from your smart meter on your house or from your cell phone. It makes the meter go It's very loud. It'll scare you, frankly, but you can't feel it. It's biological. Biological is a word in public health that means you can't feel it, but you're being affected by it. So at some point, you're going to reach a trigger point where you're going to have an injury. And there, about 5% of Americans are seriously injured by wireless or disabled by it. These folks have to leave their home. They have to go live in the car or live in a park somewhere far from the urban mesh in the city. The wireless mesh is that collection of appliance sensors in your TV, your router, your cell phones, your laptop, the 5G small cells being deployed on your street lights in your neighborhood or on your apartment building, the towers that they want to put closer and closer to your neighborhoods.
How do these injuries normally present? Like, what types of symptoms are we talking about? Like insomnia? Are we talking about
headaches?
That's where it starts. But neurological, or even tachycardia. My expert on this issue is a technology attorney who has she has heart attacks when she gets too close to that train station in New York, and she has to abandon it. When I was lobbying in Richmond with this radio frequency engineer lady, a top expert in her field from the Navy, she had to leave the legislature building because she couldn't tolerate it. There are people, and you'll meet them occasionally, that just can't handle it. And so a lot of folks will turn their routers off at night. They'll put their cell phone on airplane mode when it's in their pocket. They'll opt out of their smart meter. These are basic mitigation techniques for wireless. And then a lot of parents will fight against cell towers on their schools to protect their kids from this wireless mesh. they'll fight cell towers from coming to their neighborhoods because realtors are losing deals. 90% of home buyers in one poll didn't want a home too close to a cell tower because in some studies, more than one, they crush home values by 20%, which is great for us. You know, the more folks find out about that, that'll get the realtors involved, and they're a powerful lobby.
Yep.
And that'll help us push back against the utility companies that are putting smart meters for your electricity, for your water, for your gas. All of that radiation is cumulative. And at some point, you're going to suffer the headaches, the vertigo, the sleeplessness, the tingling, and then just, you know, the pain and the heart attacks where you can't stand it. So it's a synergistic effect with all the other environmental insults. So you want to mitigate this stuff as much as you can. You want to work with your local governments to set back with zoning the towers away from your neighborhoods, away from your schools, away from your parks. If you want to help us lobby, we're educating all the politicians. You just schedule a Zoom for me and this attorney, and we'll talk about this. There's a bunch of bills in Congress. They want to do all these weird things that are confusing, like spectrum auction sales, subsidies through FCC rules to support satellite connectivity, 5G to detect forest fires, a lot of innocuous sounding stuff. But you got to just think of it as cumulative radiation. Just like you don't want to go through the perv spy device at the airport screening. You know, that's going to hurt you. That's a radiation device.
I opt out of that every single time. Thank you very much.
It's a hassle because then you got to, you know, wait for them to come fill you up, and they may hurt you in the sensitive areas.
Makes a scene too. Like
I revel in it, and I sometimes start conversation around it because people don't know you. They are always opt out. You can always opt out of the body scanners. You just have to say, I'd like to opt out. They know exactly what that means. They'll take you through a separate side. They'll be like, hey, we've got an opt out. They'll come, they'll pat you down. You'll get patted down real good. But I revel in it because it's that little bit of freedom that we can still exercise nonviolently, protesting this whole Lido scanner thing.
Totally. I make it awkward. I make dead eye contact with them and make sounds like,
Kyle and my buddy, Gary LeChance, loves to opt out of those. I've seen him do it in a banana suit.
So, Charles, I would imagine that when you're working to get awareness about Wi-Fi and how disruptive that is to human biology, you're up against massive money lobbying in the tech industry. Like all of AI, I would assume, is relying on the coming 5G. Like I would assume there's like so many industries. Can you talk a little bit about just how many industries are relying on more Wi-Fi and more 5G and more connectivity?
It's just what you just mentioned. I mentioned the utility companies, and most states have monopolies. So here in Virginia, Dominion is a huge utility monopoly. It has branches in other states as well. So it's big energy, electricity utility companies. It's all of the telecom companies. So AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, all of the cell tower companies, Crown Castle that build the towers, all the fiber companies that lay fiber, and all those fiber companies aren't innocent. You know, they want to get in on the wireless game as well. But you know, to cut to the chase, because of the convenience of wireless and the ignorance on the dangers, it is hard to educate staffers on this issue. It's like vaccines before COVID. COVID has made vaccines easy to discuss because now people care. They don't know about wireless. They don't know about geoengineering. They know about pesticides. So some issues are easier than others. But they're synergistic. Some folks think that there's a synergistic connection between the 5G and whatever Franken ingredients are in that clot shot. So I think the health feed and vaccine people should care about wireless for that reason. There's even a synergy possibility with geoengineering, with some of the heavy metals dropped from the planes, whether legally, as Jim Lee likes to talk about, to airlines or secretively.
Where I see the connection with the atmospheric spraying is if you're putting aluminum and metal up into the sky, you're basically creating a giant, conveyor of energy, and basically creating a grid up there. in some form and fashion. I remember David Icke, like, you know, at the beginning in about April of 2020, you know, he got like canceled really hard. Like other people kept going, but David Icke got like absolutely blacklisted like nobody else. And it's because he was saying, like, you know, because of the rollout like globally of the 5G networks, that people were suffering from sickness. And then, you know, with the PCR tests, they just rolled those out, and those weren't really testing for anything. They, you know, Coca-Cola bottles were coming up positive. That, you know, potentially the entire, like his thesis was that, you know, the entire pandemic was, you know, potentially a result of the upgrade in the global network state.
Whoa.
Well, let me comment on that briefly, because I agree with that. If you think of the PCR test as just part of the psyop to create cases, because there was no virus, probably, because viral theory is probably fake. It's more about terrain. I think we all understand that. So I wanted to answer Ian's question a little better too, because it gets to Trump and JD Vance and his partner Peter Thiel and Musk.
Yeah.
And someone else was talking about the digital tracking earlier, because you know, the wireless mesh. Here's my best salesman phrase for it. Telecom wants to deploy antennas outside your bedrooms, classrooms, and parks to spy on, fry, and coerce Americans, trapping all in a digital gulag. And it'll be through Elon's all-in-one app, whatever he calls it. It'll be through Peter Thiel's Palantir system. It'll be through the digital ID, the real ID that what's her name, Chrissy Nome is trying to push at Transportation Security Administration, TSA. We have a new campaign against that. So it's not just the industry, Ian, I think it's going to profit from the wireless mesh and the AI, but it's people within the Trump aura that are also going to profit from this. And so therefore, Kennedy is that much more important because, as you know, in his Maha commission, he did put electromagnetic radiation as one of the causes to study in that Trump-ordered Maha commission to find the causes of chronic disease. And further, in his recent cooperative agreement with governors to get cell phones out of schools, the reason wasn't just the one conservatives have used for the past couple of years, which is to protect kids from the woke content and algorithm, but also now for the wireless radiation risk. So how far can Kennedy push the wireless issue for us from the inside? I don't know. I hope so. You know, very few folks are talking about it. I just know that right now we need to have lobbying on it, and that's what I'm sort of running. So if any of you want to get involved with that, we're starting to have some progress. My monthly Zoom next month is going to have Congressman Chip Roy on it, who did tweet an openness to hearing RFK explain the wireless threat. And that's what we need. We need these Freedom Caucus types, these Ron Johnson types that were great on COVID, to come on over to wireless, and then to geoengineering, obviously.
Yeah.
But you know, these are the awakened politicians who will help us.
And I'm going to remind everyone again of this quote I always bring up now, that politics is downstream of culture, meaning that the more our American culture is talking about an issue, the more permission that gives a congressperson to engage with it. Because if no one in the public is talking about it, a congressperson can feel a little crazy and way out on a limb to go and engage with it and to start talking about legislation with it. But if we're all talking about it, if we're all worried about it, if we're sharing information about it, that sort of gives them the opportunity to feel secure in their job and engage with the issue. So it's important that we all talk about it. We thereby give them permission.
Yeah. Good
yeah. And just as Bobby smartly says that we're not going to take away your vaccines, and in wireless, I find myself having to say, I'm not going to take away your wireless cell phone convenience. Everyone uses cell phones. I want to have 4G towers located in a proper way to have connectivity. 4G towers are okay. They're put in remote areas, on hilltops, in industrial zones, not near your neighborhood or your children's school. That's all we're saying. and you can have a wire to your house. And a lot of communities have their own networks, like Chattanooga. Every state has these municipal networks that are being limited by state law from expanding to rural areas. If you just get these conservatives mostly to stop limiting community wired networks from expanding to the rural areas, these conservatives would feel less pressure from their rural voters to pass wireless bills because these poor folks in the hinterlands are just desperate for any connection. So politicians are using that desperation to get that telecom money for reelection by doing whatever they want. You want your towers over there? They're paying people with farms to put transmitting towers on their barns and their homes. That stuff emits so much radiation if you're transmitting, not just receiving. So
I have a question
I mean,
about
if you look at a lot of like the beautiful high rises in many of our cities and like the penthouse apartments, and right above them they've literally got the transmitter stations. I was skiing in Deer Valley at like a fancy ass ski resort at the top of one of the mountains. On top of the top chairlift, there was a huge transmitter, and literally not 15 feet away was the bedroom of like a $20 million piece of real estate.
and that's
next to it.
And that's their leverage, because a lot of rich people are paying a lot of money to mitigate their homes with expensive paint that blocks or deflects radiation. They have money, they have influence. If they can only get their wealthy realtor friends to spread the word and start killing deals. And you can't sell this new
going to
development.
eliminate connectivity. Like, I think one of the other issues is there's the profit incentive towards excessive and like wasteful connectivity. Like you've got an apartment building where every single unit is going to have its own dedicated line and Wi-Fi like router. There's an opportunity to have like, probably more efficient design that doesn't create such toxic soup of EMF, but that comes with a cost as well.
Or Europe sells routers that will turn off when you're not using them. I'm going to order one about $200, I think. I'm probably going to sell it on my Freedom Hub show. I have a weekly Zoom, by the way, Freedom Hub, where I platform controversial people like Ian Carroll.
Let's go.
Do you have a link, Charles? If you drop it in the private chat, we can put it on the screen for you.
Okay.
I had a question based on what you just asked, Kyle, which is the same thing. When I go down to the grocery store, the shopping center, there's one building down there. Interestingly enough, it's a medical building. And on the top on both sides, it's got the 5G towers that are just like kind of blasting in both directions to reach this huge, it's like 2 miles long, basically, or a mile long, the shopping center. It looks like it's right in the middle and it's blasting both directions. Is there any research on like what that does? Like if you're on that top floor, because every time I go down there, I literally I want to walk in there, walk up to the top floor and say, anybody having issues, you're like hair standing up, headaches, nausea, tachycardia, you guys should get out of your office building. Is there any research on like tangible, this is what's happening to people that are living like directly 15 feet? I mean, they're 15 feet from it. It's 20 feet.
Yeah, I have a graph that shows how more severe the radiation toxicity is the closer you are to it. That's a nice graph. It goes in, 10 yards up to 100 yards to a mile. So we have that research. Get this, there are 40,000 studies of wireless radiation harm. And public health experts would say that settles the science, although we hate that phrase, because there's more studies against wireless radiation harm than there are studies that settle the science against pesticides, lead, and cigarettes. So that's why I said the science is suppressed, and the dynamic is the same with telecom as it is with pharma. In both areas, the science is suppressed, right? And there's a court case that has remanded the FCC's exposure guidelines, so we're flying blind. There is no regulation right now. EPA's exposure studies were defunded in 1996. FDA spent $30 million on a national toxicology program that found clear evidence of cancer and DNA damage. what did FDA do? They ignored the study. And last year, NTP announced they no longer were going to study wireless radiation harm. So here we have deployment against your will, without informed consent, of an experimental technology with no safety exposure limits and no liability. You can't sue telecom based on health reasons. Doesn't that sound similar to vaccines?
Another immunity, great.
And I remember, like, during the early days of COVID in Canada, I saw one thing of a nurse who, like, they're like, oh, this horrible case of hospitalization where she couldn't breathe. And this came back to, like, something that Ike was also talking about, which was, I think it was like the 60 hertz and, like, the notion of, like, beam forming. And that's one of the real dangers of all this equipment is, theoretically, if there's back ends to it, you could geolocate on a target and you could point additional amplify energy towards certain things. And if you amplified it enough at certain levels, it would almost be like, like those microwave crowd dispersal.
Crowd.
Well, that's what it is. He's heard
like a Faraday cage,
syndrome, right?
And so I was pretty clear, like, that woman did not have COVID. She was beamform 5G attacked because, like, the first thing they had to do was just get her on. She had no oxygen. And it wasn't like this didn't, but the media blew it up as this huge sensational COVID story when it actually looked like, a successful test of
there are targeted people, apostates from government. We've had one guest a couple of times.
Right.
An NSA employee who is a victim of wireless weaponry, and active denial is the name of the Pentagon crowd control weapon that is 5G beam forming. So it is a weapon, and after they mount it on every other street lamp in their neighborhoods and throughout the cities, they'll have a nice, convenient way to off you if you cause too much trouble or control you. So we do want to get involved with the wireless issue, as well as the vaccines and pesticides and geoengineering, all of it together. There's a conference in DC coming up mid-June. I want to put in chat and encourage folks to spend some money and time and come to that. The week of June 23rd is being hosted by some Trump insider friends of mine, the Patient First Coalition. I'm going. What they did was they polled what can pass in Congress, which won't be much because the margin of Republican control is so slim. But what the majorities of America do support are three things that give us what we want. They support unbiased science. So keep going, Kennedy. Get that unbiased science going. They support clear labeling and informed consent. Yeah. And they support holding corporations liable for their harms. Tell me you can't pass a lot of good stuff in those three areas. So mid-June, come to DC, we'll lobby those generic areas. And these are Trump insiders running it. So they have connections with the Maha caucus, which is a group of politicians in both bodies that care about these issues. And Congress hasn't done much on Maha. It's all been Kennedy, some Brooke Rollins at Ag, and some Lee Zeldin at EPA. FCC will be useless. They're a telecom puppet. But RFK got wireless radiation in his Maha investigation, and he's got it in his Kick the Phones Out of Schools project.
Is the FCC in the Maha Commission? I noticed most executive agencies are under Bobby in the Maha Commission.
A friend of mine who was a health insurance customer of mine, don't forget I sell sharing better than insurance and HSAs. She went back to in the Trump administration. She just told me today that wireless radiation is being handled by the Energy Secretary. And I replied to her, interesting, that never has happened before. It's been under the purview of the FCC, EPA, and FDA. So I don't know if FCC is there. It's one of those independent commissions, which gets into a libertarian argument. Should you have a bureaucracy independent of congressional oversight, doesn't that seem like a recipe for tyranny and run amok rogue government? I'm not sure I
Absolutely.
like that.
So I actually have a really good connections with Brendan Carr, the chairman of FCC, and I think we will be pleasantly surprised by his willingness to talk to us.
No, you won't.
Interesting.
Well,
sorry, buddy.
I've had questions about him for a
He's a
while.
wireless whore.
Maybe you're making the wrong approach, but I will say, like,
Okay,
one person I've had trouble
if you
with
can
on
get
this-
him, I will be pleased.
Yeah, so I could definitely set up and have a conversation, and right, but again, I will say this, like Jim Jordan, who goes on Fox News and spouts all right. Oh, he sounds so good. Has betrayed us on this issue no less than a dozen times, and like I have the quote unquote Freedom Caucus. I've had trouble with on these types of issues over the years that they sound like they're very freedom oriented, but the reality is that they're all on the payroll.
It depends. Freedom Caucus is pretty big, about 50 politicians. I've worked with a bunch of them over the years, and they've been really good in COVID, but not all of them. Not everyone in Freedom Caucus is with us because, like most people, they've been programmed that vaccines are God's gift to humanity. And then, what were you going to say? Oh, a funny thing. At RFK's nomination announcements with Trump in the Oval Office, after he won the nomination to the committees, one of the Freedom Caucus people there with him was a guy named, I think, Buddy Guy from Georgia, who's one of the biggest wireless bill promoters. So it's going to be interesting to me to see how these Kennedy Maha friends who have been so pro wireless, what they're going to do when they learn. They don't know the dangers of wireless. It's not their fault. They haven't been educated, or they haven't cared to look. Or maybe they do know and just don't care. I don't know. But how good a friend of Maha are you really? Well, we want your help on broadband connectivity that's not going to spy on us, fry us, or coerce our behavior.
I have a silly question. Doesn't it seem like a really easy way for us to block out radiation poisoning? If everyone gets slow radiation poisoning, the brilliant, sneaky, dirty part of it is all of our symptoms are entirely different. But an easy way to block that out would be if we had lead paint. And that would keep radiation out of your house. But they took that from us too, because they planned on already doing this. I just think it's curious.
Would lead
that
paint actually shield you against this?
Yeah, lead is an actual blocker of radiation. That's why every time you go to the dentist, they stand behind a wall or they lay a big, huge vest on you. But if you had a lead house, that would be very heavy and very expensive. So over time, I would theorize that the technology that used to exist, we knew this, but they took that away from us in our Rockefeller education. And then
Cheney
they said,
tinfoil is my favorite tinfoil. I love it.
Agreed.
Man,
Charles, you mentioned the paint. You mentioned the rich people having a special paint. Is it, what kind of paint are you talking about?
I was told there'll be no math in this debate.
All right, don't worry about it. What are we going to
but to give you the basic communication answer, we have a semi-monthly wireless call, and we have experts on, and there are some great building biologists, which is a new trade. They get paid well. They go into your home. They help you mitigate, and paint is one of the options. Metals around your smart meter. They know all of it. It's expensive. And rich people buy their services, but it's a growing trade. Building biologists, it's fantastic. But there are some simple free things everyone's got to do, and this will help us grow our movement. Just tell folks, turn off the router at night. Put your cell phone on airplane mode when it's in your pocket.
Yes, you'll feel the difference.
Smart meter. Pardon me?
I said, you'll feel the difference. When I forget to put my phone in airplane mode, I wake up in the morning and I think about it the first thing, and I'm like, yep, sure enough, you can feel if you forget. So I would highly recommend that to everyone. Yeah.
Same with the router turning off at night, you feel it.
Charles or anyone else here, do any of you know about these little coiled wire kind of pendants and stickies and things that people selling now that
You
are
can put
supposed
on
to
your
mitigate
phones and stuff
Wi-Fi
like that.
damage?
Does it
Are
do
those
anything?
real?
Yeah, I've got one.
Because I've
I
got
can
a
show
couple
it
of
to you.
here.
Rayguard, one of our board members runs Rayguard.
Yeah, I've got one right there.
What is that you're talking about,
actually
Ian?
work at all?
What do you have, Ian?
I've got one that's like a little it's like a little dot that's sticky that has like all the coiled wires in it, and I was given one that was sticky for my phone and one that's like a necklace that you can wear at an event I was at by a company that makes these things, and I didn't know how to like do any deeper research into whether this was real or not, but things similar to that like are supposedly Wi-Fi protectors that protect you against this radiation. Have you seen anything that makes that seem real at all? Is that
yes and no? So the experts argue.
Okay.
You're just going to have to meet your experts. It's just like natural health care, right?
Yep.
Which modality works?
Well, it's also a mind thing too, right?
Placebo,
If you believe it works, like, yeah, these are the quantum dots. Like I think they're only about $30 each at that. This is this is a tower buster piece of organite. the organite group is great.
I'm now thinking though, Kyle, you need that little organite as a case to put your little pouches in, because it'd look cool to carry around. I kept thinking you were holding up an house container.
Dude, you need to put that on a pendant and be the crunchiest Flava Flav.
Oh, there are great organite pendants out there. Great, man. There's people that make organite in all different types of phases.
For sure.
I said this before too, but I saw this one study that showed, 2 cell phones and a seed between. And grow. The 2 cell phones were going back and forth. They had actually 3 studies. So one was 2 phones transmitting back and forth, and that plant did not do so well. Then there was the plant that had no phones, and it grew well. And then there was the 2 phones with the plant and organite, and that one grew especially fast. It excelled at its growth. So, is there a way that we can actually leverage all this energy to channel and become superhuman and unlock our superpowers? That's my
first, folks.
Well, that gets to Tesla, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, Nikola Tesla, not the our company. Yeah,
and old world theory, right?
For sure.
For sure. The Zeppelins and the Spires.
Yeah, and by the way, there are a couple of other things that are just real easy stuff we can all do. One, ditch your wireless earbuds, go back to wired headphones.
Oh, definitely.
Right. Another is, if you're not going to turn your phone on airplane mode, some folks they need to stay available. Make sure that when you're sleeping, your phone is at least slightly out of reach. There's the inverse square law on how waves propagate. Just get it like 2 or 3 feet away from you, and it's way, way better than being like right by your head. And same deal with your Wi-Fi routers. Make sure it's not by your bed, your couch, or your desk. Just get it, some feet away. And that at least helps, right? Just practical things we can do without changing much else about what we're doing.
Yeah.
And it sounds silly. Somebody put in here, like, people talk about like doing gardening with copper and all these wires and stuff. You can also get a sleep mat, because all of your mattresses are completely not grounding. They're made out of petrol and plastics, and they don't have any spring or metal in them anymore. So they have nothing to attach to the wood frame or anything that used to actually be real. So you can buy things to attach to the outside still. That's a wire you can run to your sleep mat. Or even yoga mats. Think of how many people do yoga and they are like, I'm going to go get grounded. Not on that mat, you're not.
Right.
So I just think it's super interesting how much people talk about this kind of like grounding out. And then if you actually think of currency, we were talking about it, Billy and I, before we got on air, like gold having a spike, that's conductive. Silver having a spike, that's conductive. Even your old currency of money, hemp, is a conductive material. So even cryptocurrency becomes conductive energy. And so for whatever reason, it seems to be very important to them. This is like levels above Club Maha, but they're not only using chemtrails on us, they're writing sigils on us. And so you get into this like dark arts rituals that they're doing to us over our heads. And that is creepy to me. Like they're putting heavy metals, they're using mercury, which is a messenger of their lowercase gods, and then they're putting animal DNA and all this stuff, and then writing signs on us that we don't understand.
Pentagrams up in the sky.
Pretty much a pentagram would be like an easy one that we all kind of understand, but I think there's darker stuff for them than the star.
Yeah. You know, and I appreciate Robbie Sunshine in the chat here just saying go outside and walk barefoot every day to ground yourself.
Yeah, that's the best grounding right there.
Yep. Because not only are we experiencing all these waves and that's interacting with the heavy metals that we've eaten and taken into our bodies, but we're not discharging it just at all. Like you were saying, Cheney, because we're sleeping on stuff that's fake. We're walking on our rubber shoes. You gotta discharge it.
There are real studies that show that really works. Absolutely.
Yeah. And chances are, unless you're living in freaking Calcutta, that you're also getting some fresh air by doing that too.
And just to give another validity with Charles's, he brought up Havana syndrome. That's a real thing. You guys can all look it up when you think frequencies can't hurt you. There's another thing called a brown note you can look up. And then if you want to get into a next level of conspiracy, you can look into Isaac Cappy getting a voice of God sent right to his head. And the person in his car that's still alive, she gives interviews where she heard what he heard. So I think what they can do with frequencies, you might not know about it, but it doesn't mean it's not real.
Yeah, well, and there was even a fun anecdote with Lucille Ball, of all people, that she was driving around LA one time during World War II or something, and she
doing like radio broadcasts.
Yeah, she found like a spy base because she started
a Russian submarine or something.
It was something like that because she started picking up radio signals in her metal tooth filling.
And it was like vibrating in her bones. And
she was getting induction sound.
Yeah, and they actually like busted a spy ring because of it. It's like
you can't write this shit. It sounds contrived.
Wow. So I started looking up the little dots that I was asking about, and it's from Aries. And on their website, if you go to ariestech.com, they have studies published, and they have brain scans apparently of people with and without the technology in play, where they're showing EMF interference in EEG brain scans. So it's a pretty interesting rabbit hole that I intend to go down a little more, because we all know, we know that the radiation does have negative effects on your body and on your physiology, but it's just cool to see how much research is being done. And it's also wild to think about how much this research is being suppressed, which is exactly what Charles was talking about.
Yeah. And if you want to get in the weeds on wireless radiation, I put in chat the link to join the semi-monthly call twice a month, where they do have the building biologists come on and they'll argue about what mitigation methods and devices work. And one expert will say that's great, the other will say no, it's nonsense. And some of them are selling their own stuff, so you got to take that into consideration. But we review all the bills. We have the experts come on. So it's part of the Maha efforts, pick your battle: vaccines, pesticides, GMOs, vaccines, wireless. I think I repeated myself, but
it's wild that they can use the EMS spectrum. We're so dependent on light. They want to block out the sun with the geoengineering. And this is just part of that spectrum. But this is the way it works, right? The evil that we see, it's always something good that's been twisted. Charles, I had a question. I was so glad to hear you say, 4G is enough, right? And I remember when 5G was coming out, I'm like, what's the point of this? Because way back when, I remember so many times I was super rural and I could still stream, in HD. I'm like, what do we need this 5G for? And then now it does seem like the Internet of Things, nanotechnology, it's all of these things that really, seem nefarious. I wanted to ask you along those lines, do you think the Starlink is safer than a lot of EMF technology? Because, we're having that discussion recently, how safe is this? How could they really test it? So
I'm
what do
glad
you think?
you asked that, because I was wondering too.
Yep.
Yeah. I've got some links on that. It's untested, and it is wireless, and the satellites are spraying on everyone en masse. So it's an experiment. Is it less dangerous because it's higher up? You know,
Mhm.
the whole inverse square math that one of you was talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know there's been GAO reports complaining about lack of safety testing. I think at the very least, um, the setup is there for Elon to insert his Starlink because of the games being played by the industry to leave these poor rural households with bad connections, where they'll be desperate to take anything they can get, whether it's Starlink or fixed wireless antennas, lining up the canyon and valley towards their house. When in the long run, it actually is cheaper to dig a ditch and lay fiber because it lasts half a century, whereas antennas last only 5 years and need to be replaced. Um, so whether you want Starlink or not, I believe in choice, but at the very least, we've already paid for a wired connection through surcharges on our landlines over the past decade. And that case is under litigation. It's called the Irregulators lawsuit. And the DC Appeals Court ruled that the attorneys general in every state can audit what happened to that money. But basically, telecom took surcharges you paid on your phone landline bill and diverted it to their telecom schemes. So this could be a multi-billion dollar, $100 billion controversy if it does grow. Maybe we'll claw back that money and make telecom give us all the wired connections that we want. Polls show that we do want wired connections. It's faster, cheaper in the long run, more reliable, and more secure. But meanwhile, there's a perfect setup for Elon to get his Starlink money because telecom is not digging ditches for fiber to the rural people who are desperate for any connection. But the 4G towers located far apart do work. They broadcast 9 miles. So that's all you need. 4G towers broadcasting 9 miles for a network. They'll take care of your mobile calls and some internet downloads. But every house and business should have a wired connection to what's called the last mile. We've already paid for it. It's safer. It's cheaper in the long run.
So one of the reasons I've considered Chattanooga, because they were one of the only places in the country where the city actually deploys the fiber optic network they already own. Most cities already have a municipal fiber optic network that they deployed for affordable, high-speed broadband for their citizens. And after they did it, the fiber optic network operators, the private ones, freaked out and started going around the country passing ordinances and laws preventing cities from allowing cities to open up those networks to their citizens. So it keeps it all private.
I clicked community networks that I just put in chat, and it took me off of your show. Sorry about that. That's a map of these community municipal wired networks that Damo, is that your name?
Yeah, that's me. Hey.
Damo mentioned. Chattanooga is the most widely known example of that, but every state has them. They're also run by tribes or co-ops.
Mm-hmm.
And Utah has a great company called Utopia that is linking up all these rural towns. And the beauty of it is it sounds Democrat. It's local governments building their own networks and then leasing access to private companies, which pay them. So it's a money-making source for local governments, and they can then offer discounted charges to families with school-age children, and their prices are stable. And the private wireless and wired companies don't like the competition, so they get states to pass laws barring Chattanooga, this happened, from expanding beyond their county to surrounding counties. There again, leaving rural households desperate for any connection, no matter how dangerous. So that's a pretty seedy dynamic we're facing. It's pretty disgusting what they're doing. So
Yeah, and this is interesting, right? Because like basic infrastructure, and you have to consider internet connectivity, basic infrastructure is one of the things that's it's pretty reasonable to expect our duly elected governments to provide for us based on, you know, whatever. It just, to me at least, makes sense.
Yeah, but we've already paid for it.
That,
So
right.
surcharge
That's the best
on a
argument.
landline over the past decade. No one knows about this, but no one knows anything about what I'm talking about because there hasn't been a COVID catastrophe to make folks care, like they care about vaccines. So it's an uphill battle, but RFK cares about it. So that's important. That's really important leverage. Thank goodness he's there.
Yeah,
I
he
had a
was on that
detour I
Joe
wanted to
Rogan
bring up.
podcast. Go ahead, Billy.
I had a detour I want to bring up. The last 5 minutes we're talking about light and EMF, and the famous biohacker Brian Johnson recently stated that he bought, I think, thousands of these incandescent bulbs because we've outlawed them here in the United States. Any thoughts on that? Outlining the good light that's got like this broad spectrum and going to these LEDs that have EMF warnings, as someone said in the chat.
My marketplace link there is my weekly Freedom Hub show, and just a month ago, I had the top expert talk about this insane rule that Biden had that did limit what kind of lights you can buy, and that you want to have access to traditional old-time incandescent light bulbs because it does give you all the light spectrum that you need for health, the similar to what you get from the sun, including ultraviolet and other branches of the spectrum that you don't get from the new LED lights. They're a much more limited spectrum and are very unhealthy for you.
And there's the flicker aspect too that I've heard people mention.
Yeah, it's really bad for you. So look on that link and watch that guide. He's called the Light Doctor. You should have him on. There's so many great experts when you get into healthcare that are so with us. And you know, if you think economically, healthcare is the worst market because, like education, it's so top heavy with middlemen and admin, and actual frontline delivery is flatline, just as with teachers. It's such a cartel. And as Lord Acton said, the corruption makes men even more corrupt. These global schemers in healthcare and telecom and elsewhere technology are cornered tigers. You know, they have their millions and they won't let go without a huge fight. It's not going to be easy for Maha to win on these issues. You guys feel it, right?
Oh yeah. Well, and it's a fog of war, chaos sort of situation because it's all coming at us all at once. And how do we focus on all of them all at once? And there's enough of us to do so. It's kind of like what you were saying before, pick your issue. And there are enough of us to sort of push these issues, but it's still happening all at once. And you still need to generate broader support beyond the most passionate to get these things top of mind and put the pressure on them to make it happen.
Yeah, we are up against this propaganda machine. It's got to be the most articulate. They put so much power and so much experience into just getting all these systems dialed in. It's so important, like Ian was saying, just keep raising the awareness, getting the truth spoken, and that's how you overcome.
Yeah, and by the way, Charles, you say there's all sorts of experts in all these areas, and we know that's true. You know them. Hook us up, buddy. We'd love to have them on the show. We'd love to get these folks in here to educate us and our audience.
I got one final detour. I want to link up the light, limiting our light spectrum, taking our kids, putting them in school all day. My 6th grader doesn't even go outside anymore. He gets in there at 9. He's out at 4:30 by the time he gets home. If you look into vitamin D, and I think, Charles, you said something at the beginning of the show mentioning supplements. I wanted to see if you had any exposure to this. Vitamin D in the 70s, you could take 150,000 IU to 300,000 IU, and now we're sometimes down to 1 and 5,000. And I've read some reports outlining that it's kind of not even enough. It's not even really doing anything when you take 1,000 or 5,000. And if you just search NIH vitamin D 150,000 IU, you'll come up with these studies saying that they're perfectly fine, and that's what they used to give. Is there any insight you have on like that supplement and what vitamin D can do, and like should we be taking larger amounts, and is there kind of this conspiracy to get us off of the natural supplements and the supplements supplements that we do have make them so small that we don't even get affected by them?
Well, I'm not the expert on that specific question, but indirectly, what I can say is that I mentioned one of the things the National Health Federation is known for is being the only natural negotiator at this United Nations thing called Codex, which standardizes the food trade. And food includes nutritional supplements. And one horrible scheme the big biotech interests that dominate that body have tried over the decades is to top the potency of vitamins that are traded internationally and to get the FDAs of each country to harmonize with those standards. So it doesn't surprise me that they have smothered or suppressed the potency that you need for proper health. I think all of us know that, going outside in the sun to ground is where you get your best vitamin D. I think we're all nutritionally deficient. I'll also mention a health payment issue around health savings accounts. We discussed autism earlier. Today I had a pioneer in developmental treatment for autism patients, babies, movement therapy to get them crawling properly. And insurance companies are not your friend for a lot of alternative treatments that you'll want if you're self-thinking. You want to build up your health savings account so that you can pay cash for more and more procedures and possibly go even outside the country to Tijuana or Cancun, for cancer therapy, which is better over there. So one of the provisions of the health savings account bills in Congress is to allow supplement eligibility for health savings account purchases. So, can't give you a detailed answer on that specific lowering of potency recommendations. It doesn't surprise me. Project Cheney said they took the lead paint out of houses to expose us to wireless radiation. Why wouldn't they lower recommended potency for nutrition to make you sicker and more reliant on pharma's pills in the long run? Sickness is big business. But we're trying to fight the good fight at the international codex level. Every other year, we have to fight the FDA, which has terrible nutritional recommendations. They had a new dietary ingredient fight a couple years ago that we had to defeat. That was really dangerous because they wanted manufacturers to submit the ingredient list for new dietary supplements. And the problem is, what if FDA doesn't accept your new formula as an acceptable supplement, which was on the table for something called NAC, which is a powerful alternative for COVID. And
N-acetylcysteine,
I'm sure
right?
worried. Pardon me?
N-acetylcysteine, NAC.
Yep. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what Bobby Kennedy does at FDA with supplement regulation as well as pharma regulation.
Totally.
Because nutritional supplementation is important. A lot of folks dismiss it. A lot of folks get worked up about bad ingredients or manufacturing practices or the junk from them when they're imported from China. Those are all valid concerns. And we want people eating whole foods, steamed veggies to get the real natural source of nutrition. But, if the soil is so depleted, can you really get enough nutrients from even wholesome vegetables or meat? I don't know. That's a big topic, and we certainly have our experts. That's one of our big issues at NHF going back decades. We helped pass this law in 1994 to protect supplements from overregulation at FDA. It's called a law called DSHEA. So long-winded answer, a lot of stuff, but not the direct answer.
Yeah, one of the things, Billy, that I do know, and I'm not the expert, and I'm probably missing some details here, is that vitamin D supplementation will not do what it ultimately can do unless you also take it with vitamin K or vitamin K2, and there's some great supplements that combine the two. And then I think it's also magnesium and maybe vitamin A also, because part of vitamin D's role is helping you metabolize calcium properly. And it's these other vitamins that help make sure that calcium is then going to the right places in your body. When we look at supplements, it's really important to recognize where they are synergistic with other things. One of the problems with supplements, it seems like, and medications also, is that they really try to sort of distill things down to like one thing. And they're often, you need whole plant medicine, that whole spectrum of something that grew naturally. Cannabis is a great example, right? Bunch of different cannabinoids, a bunch of different terpenes and flavonols that operate in concert with one another. So don't get too obsessed with one thing without understanding how it might interact with other things you need to get the most out of it.
That's like Ayurveda, all their ingredients are a combination of different things, and they're weird combinations. But even Chinese medicine, and that gets to compounding from the pharmacist. Tomorrow on my Freedom Hub show, I have a pharmacist, and personally, if you want personalized medicine, I have high hopes that compounding at the pharmacy will be a future source of good healing. Unfortunately, right now, a lot of compounding at pharmacists is a bunch of pharma mixing, which is important for folks who are allergic to certain fillings that are used by pharmaceutical manufacturers. But, I have vendor friends that use AI, your blood, DNA, and local environmental pollution factors to give you a health score and a functional medicine track to get healthy. And back to pesticides, people don't know this. Morley Robbins, a famous supplement expert, warned us that pesticides suppress the battery function of your cells and depletes your copper. And people argue about too much copper, not enough copper, too much iron, not enough iron. But there are so many different experts on supplements that you do need to hear from a bunch of them to get sort of a basic handle on it, because it's a bit more complicated. And Damo, you're so right. It's the geniuses behind this are going to give you a collection of nutrients, right? That's geared towards your problems.
Totally. It's hard for us though, in listening to all these experts. Like I'm chronically online. It's a problem, and I'm on X a lot, and I'm dealing with gut issues and dietary issues and all this stuff. But I'm drinking from the fire hose here, and I'm getting all these different philosophies and all these different ideas on what's right. But without what Bobby would call gold star science, I don't know what's right. I've got to sit here and experiment. And sometimes it's hard to tell if something's helping or not, especially with a chronic condition that I might have to dial it in and stay dialed in for an extended period of time to reach even milestones, let alone where I'm trying to go.
Have you tried sunning your balls yet?
Not often.
Feel about the whole package down there. You have to really get
and the butthole too. Apparently, is an
you got to sun the butthole for sure.
Your yoni
vitamin D producer.
Yeah.
No, that being said, I have been
all
sunning my
joking aside,
body.
it's really great if you have the privacy, if you have the time, get out there. No sunscreen, sun your balls, sun your vag, get some sun on those zones. It is very healthy, and that's where you produce a lot of vitamin D too. Your body produces a lot of vitamin D when you're full sun exposure, and ideally you're sweating too. Sunscreen kills that production and is putting a bunch of junk on your body. If you're going to be prolonged exposure in the sun, like a zinc, like a good hard thick pasty zinc, like what surfers wear, is a good solution. But also don't just cook yourself ad nauseum,
don't burn.
A little bit of burning every now and then isn't
a little bit of tanning, like gradual buildup of tanning.
The build up part, right?
Sometimes you should get a burn. I'm going to say it. Sometimes you should get a good burn. You get a good peel on, and it'll kind of go.
I'll take a burn over chemicals in my skin any day of the week.
That's fair.
Yes.
Yes. But if you're golfing every day, beware, 4 hours of direct exposure on your arm, wear a long sleeve shirt, wear some high grade natural clothing. I'm wearing this shirt because it's got this really dope patch that Johnny gave me, but otherwise I shouldn't be wearing this shirt. It's polyester. It's junk. This isn't high vibe. This isn't what
those first Maha shirts you made when we started doing that project were all those performance tees, and I was like, ew.
Get some linens, huh, Kyle? Man, and they're saying the sunglasses are bad for burning, right? So if you're wearing the sunglasses and you're out in the sun, you're not getting the same hormones to your body to tell you to have.
I don't think you should wear sunglasses.
Yeah,
And don't ask me why, but someone just gave a good presentation on that.
Yeah, it has to do with the way that your body changes how it's preparing for sunlight when your eyes understand that you're in the sun. And so if you're shielding your eyes from that UV radiation that tells you you're in the sun right now,
that's
your body
interesting,
doesn't
man.
prepare. Plus, I mean, look at Dustin. Like, just look.
Blocking signals that allow your body to know what's going on.
That's why I wear my sunglasses at night.
I love it.
Style, man.
These wireless experts that I know have all these weird red and blue glasses.
Yeah,
computers that I'm learning about.
Yep.
All
Yeah, my
you need is
first
a good
big
pair of
fight
pit
on the
vipers.
internet was with Hank Green about sunscreen. We got into it, and Hank Green was ready to go the distance about how sunscreen saves everyone's lives.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I'm glad I stood strong.
Dude, benzene, petroleum products are often, if maybe never, good for us, you know, and that was great to see this week, getting all these petroleum derivatives banned from our kids' candies we're eating. Just what a lot of nonsense.
And just a step one, right? I think he's moving on to doing the same in pharmaceuticals too.
Yeah,
Like,
we had
why,
that.
why does my pill have red dye number 40 in it? I don't need it to be colored.
Yeah. How do we replace the fluoride in the public water supplied with spirulina?
Interesting.
The one thing I'll say about sunglasses being on the water here in Maryland is that if you're on the water prolonged, there's some interesting research that they did specifically with people who spend a lot of time on the water. If you're on the water a lot, specifically that water reflection, the lens reflection.
Same thing with snow blindness, right?
Yeah, that reflection can cause issues. So if you're in, like, you wouldn't want to wear sunglasses
It
all
hurts
the time, but
so bad.
Putting it on for some of that time, if you're overexposed to sun and you're on the water on a boat looking through lenses, you definitely want to probably supplement and have some sunglasses on to protect. And that from that research, it seems it was all boaters, and they had higher rates of eye irritation, like issues with watery eyes, issue with like cataracts later in life. So there is a place for it.
For people that don't know what snow blindness is, it's essentially sunburning your eyeballs, and there is no escaping the pain, because when you open your eyes, they immediately dry out and they burn, and when you close your eyes, you're like slapping a sunburn on your eyeballs and it burns, and so you just cry all night long profusely, and maybe the next day too, and you wish you'd never done that to yourself. Don't ever get snow blindness, or the same can happen from the water.
It's a welding injury.
Bingo.
For welders, it's the same. Like, maybe sunglasses are a good tool for people who actually need them, but not everybody needs them. And so people have just started to use them in ways of like, I'm going to use these because I'm just sitting in my backyard reading. And it's like, nah, probably you should look at the page. And so, but I do think it is. I always wonder how many of these studies are done on eye color. I feel like so much of, I don't want to take a hard, this will be a whole nother conversation.
We'll do it on tinfoil.
Rabbit hole alert.
Kids, you can't mog without a good pair of pit vipers. It just doesn't work.
But that's the thing, right?
Gotta
I think
have
most people wear sunglasses just because they look cool.
Goddamn right we do.
I mean, and they do. That's the problem. They really do.
But I do want to also shout out, if you're one of the 30,000 people that is finding this on YouTube or X or Rumble, do make sure you hit the bell or the thumbs up or a heart, or everything helps the algorithm. Feel free to comment or repost or share later on. And if you caught this in the middle somewhere, go back and listen to the beginning. That helps too. So it's always good to find information, because this is an info war. And if you have good instruments of good knowledge, you can help save a life. Legitimately.
Totally.
So.
And most of you folks are probably watching on Ian's X account. Please go click over to the Club Maha X account and click that follow button. We stream there too. That really helps us grow.
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to everybody, like Charles, everybody on the panel, everybody out there on Maha, and everybody just speaking up for the truth. You know, they're trying to gaslight us about everything, right? And finally, people are talking more and more about the geoengineering. It's coming in. We're moving the Overton window. We got 31 states. You know, we were talking about the autism thing, right? They're trying to shut down those voices. And, you know, I wanted to talk about that earlier, just real quick. You it's similar to what we're seeing with, the way they're doing this with the transgender agenda. It feels like they want us proud of the disorders they're giving us, and they're trying to make us walk on eggshells about it. And they're making it harder than ever to speak the truth. So it's time to stand up about all of this, be it the EMF, be it what they're doing to us on the autism spectrum, all the way. It's time to stand up and keep speaking.
Oh man,
Power.
Yes,
Preach,
sir.
bro.
Yes. I made this during our show tonight. I feel pretty good about it. It's been a while.
Is that your Wi-Fi?
I've still got a picture of one of those you gave me on that Wizards Mansion property in Boulder Creek, California.
That was a pretty good spot.
I remember that. Christopher Hill's place.
Christopher Hill's.
Yep. And I don't know if you remember
this place called the University of the Trees. And
that was
my gosh, what
Bruce
a wizard.
Damer, right? University of the Trees. He's a heady dude.
Did I ever see the trees? Or the big tree? This guy was so mental. On the biggest tree in his property, he had a hitching little chair that would take him up, and he had a platform up on the very top of the tree, and he would go up there and meditate and receive these
Commune with
radical
the tree
downloads.
and download knowledge.
Just download insane. And then he went, and I think he was one of he started upgrading spirulina and started concocting all sorts of different things. He was close to Bucky Fuller. They were doing some wild stuff. He wrote this book called Order of the Phoenix. I've got it. It's one of the coolest books I ever had. And he passed away, unfortunately, and he left everything there. It's unbelievable land. And then a bunch of well-intentioned hippies kind of came in and had a good run on the spot. And but it is still just
That was a trip, man.
epic.
That was
cool.
totally a trip.
And it was there.
No way. Well, as we start to wrap up the night, Charles, how can you just remind us all one more time how people can find you and your work? Because you've been such a resource tonight, and clearly we only barely touched on all your knowledge and resources. So remind people where they can find you to follow along for more and to get some of these resources.
Well, I do three things. Forbes featured how the brokerage I work at makes the cash patients that you need to have a real functioning health system, and that helps you find integrated or more natural care. That's tied to my weekly show at Freedom Hub, and that's your-mp.com, your-mp.com. And tomorrow's show is on a pharmacist on his reform ideas. And then my lobbying client, the world's oldest health freedom organization, is thenhf.com. So those two places you can find me. We do need people to help us lobby, schedule Zoom so we can educate congressional staff on all the Maha issues, whether the poisoning of our air, water, land, or food or medicine, or talk about health payment reform issues like health savings accounts or having sharing compete with insurance. And then at that website, thenhf.com, sign up for our e-list so you get invited to our monthly Zooms. May 16th, our May Zoom, we'll have Congressman Roy and Scott McCullough. We'll talk about the things that this congressman likes: expanded health savings accounts. He's interested in the wireless issue. He was a champion during COVID against vaccine mandates. So I'll be glad to work with any of you to get more involved in any of the Maha issues. So thanks very much for Billy for the invitation. It was nice to meet everyone. Ian, great job on Rogan.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming on tonight. Really appreciate all the knowledge.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Kyle, you want to take us out of here?
I just found this book, Rise of the Phoenix. Thinking of that. Look at this guy.
Well, check this out. You see it? This pen? It looks like a syringe.
Vaccine pen.
It's a vaccine pen. That was the Texans are vaccine choice at our Dallas conference. That was the best exhibitor swag. I love it.
Whoa, so it's like a writing pen, huh?
It's a writing pen.
That's cool. That's super
Trying to get
cool.
the camera work. I'm so bad at this.
Oh, it looks good. It's all right. That's wild.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. It's Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. Big shout out to Charles for joining us and sharing and giving us the insight of one of the leading natural lobbyists within Washington, D.C. Definitely join and let's support him in any way we can. And we'll be back next week. Until then, thank you to everybody. Thank you, Johnny, for being here. Thank you, Billy, for being here. Thank you, Cheney, for being here, for supporting, for running this show. Thank you, Damo. Thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Ian. Let's go. Let's grow. This is Club Maha. If you enjoy this, go to clubmaha.com. Find us on Patreon. Support us any way you like. But we'll be back next week. We love you. Let's go. Let's make America healthy again.
The sun on the field, the feeling I feel when I'm living my life for what's real. Make America healthy, feeling like it's time for a change. We're going back to common sense, making America healthy again. We're going back to common sense, making America healthy again. We're going back up healthy again.